Have you gotten yourself into a situation that's difficult? Maybe you're feeling like you're in bondage to something, whether it's financial bondage, health bondage, a bad relationship, whatever it may be. And you're wondering, okay, is this something that I need to get myself out of, or is this something that I can expect God to help me get out of? And over the course of my life, I have many times leaned on my own ingenuity and my own resourcefulness and thought, I need to get myself out of this. I got myself into it. I have to get myself out of it. So I want to explore this a little bit and see if this is really true or whether this is something we impose upon ourselves. And I was reading today in Mosiah, this is out of the Book of Mormon, Mosiah 21, and there's a story here about some people who are in bondage. They're called Nephites, and they're in bondage to Lamanites. And the Lamanites are taxing them up to 50%. They're driving them like animals. They're putting yokes on their back and driving them like animals. They're smiting them. They're treating them really poorly. Historically, these people who have been driven have not been the best people. They have slid into wickedness. They had a wicked king who really led them astray, but they're starting to come back to God and they're calling upon God. And as they call upon God, he starts to strengthen them by degrees so they can handle what is happening to them. Now, there's another group of people that are the followers of a man named Alma, and he's from the same city as these Nephites are from. His people immediately covenant with the Lord. They repent. They get baptized. They make this covenant with the Lord, and they're miraculously delivered from the bondage of the Lamanite people. God puts the guards to sleep one night, and they sneak out around them. And so they've already gone on, and they're going back to their homeland that's a better place where they have more Nephites that are in freedom. But these people that are under King Limhi, they're still in bondage. And somebody comes from a city called Zarahemla. That's where they were all originally from. And they thought that Zarahemla had been destroyed. They're so excited to see this man named Ammon and his people who have come looking for them, like, what happened to y'all? We want to bring you back if you need to come back. And so he's come to help them to get out of there, but the Lamanites are really cracking the whip, and they're not strong enough to fight them with the sword to get out. And so Limhi and Ammon and their people, they kind of have a powwow here. And this is in Mosiah 21, verses 35 and 36. And it says, they were desirous to be baptized as a witness and a testimony that they were willing to serve God with all their hearts. Nevertheless, they did prolong the time, and an account of their baptism shall be given hereafter. And now all the study of Ammon and his people and King Limhi and his people was to deliver themselves out of the hands of the Lamanites and from bondage. Notice this term, deliver themselves out of bondage, okay? Alma and his people, they cry to the Lord, and the Lord delivers them from bondage. But these people, they're kind of farther behind the growth path of faith, and they feel like they have to deliver themselves from bondage, and then they'll go make this covenant. They'll go back to Zarahemla, and they'll find somebody to baptize them. And obviously they needed the authority to be baptized, and Ammon didn't feel like he was good enough to do it. And so they postpone this covenant, and they really dig in on how they can solve their own problem. And in the next chapter, in chapter 22, verse 1, it says, and now it came to pass that Ammon and King Limhi began to consult with the people how they should deliver themselves out of bondage. Notice that again. And even they did cause that all the people should gather together, and this they did that they might have the voice of the people concerning the matter. So they're pulling everybody together. They get an opinion poll. What should we do? And one man among them named Gideon says, those guards at the back pass, why don't we give them some extra wine? They'll get drunk, they'll go to sleep, and we can sneak out the back pass. And that's what they do. So in the end, you could say God did deliver the people of Limhi because God inspired Gideon what to do to take advantage of a weakness of these Lamanites and get out the back door. Now, the question that really struck me here was, did they have to solve this of their own accord? I believe that perhaps they did, not for the reason that God wouldn't have done it, but because they weren't ready to believe that God would do it. There had been prophecies that they would be driven, that they would have to bear burdens because they had killed a prophet named Abinadi, and they felt like they were being punished. And they brought this up quite frequently. Abinadi said this was going to happen to us, that we were going to be driven like animals, and that, we were going to be in bondage, and here we are. We brought this on ourselves. We were wicked. Well, Alma and his people had done the same thing, but they repented and they believed that they were forgiven. Okay, so they believed in God enough to have the faith to make the covenant, to believe that God would deliver them. But Limhi and his people were still basically creating a barrier to receiving what God probably would have been willing to do, but they did not believe they were deserving of it. They felt like we still got to pay the price for what we did, when really they probably wouldn't have had to if they'd believed in Jesus Christ, his atonement, his ability to forgive them and let them move on. So this has got me thinking about how many times I have felt like I needed to be the one to figure it out. And I've gone to great lengths to figure out my own problems. And then there's been other times, the older I get, the more I'm like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of thinking that I have to fix this, because frankly, there was a time in my life that I got myself in such a big mess that there was no way for me to get myself out of it. Everything had gone to the pot, and I just gave up, and I went to the Lord, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to let you have this. And he miraculously delivered me. Miraculously. There is no way that I would have ever orchestrated any of the series of events that delivered me from my bondage, relationship bondage, financial bondage, combined, grief, loss, all of it combined. And God got me out of it. And so it taught me that I had been worrying and fretting and trying to fix a lot of things, that if I would give it to the Lord, he would fix for me. And that I could go to this space of trust and faith and enough obedience, just like Alma and his people were obedient to God, give my obedience, my heart, my will to God, and he would deliver me. So ask yourself, what am I putting up as a barrier to receiving? Because while these people wanted to make the covenant, they wanted to commit, they were starting to feel the desire, they weren't really willing to do it. Okay, they weren't really willing, because Ammon, the guy who came, even he was in that space. And this could have been something kind of generational for these people, feeling like, we've got to pay the price to the nth degree of whatever we did, and we can't ask for help. So not even the guy that was sent to deliver them or to find them believed he was good enough to help them out, to make this covenant with God. So how are we putting barriers up? I have a situation where I'm taking care of my elderly father, and most of the time I do fairly well taking care of him. Sometimes I get really frustrated, and I'm just like, I don't do anything horrible or anything, but I lose my temper. Okay. I get within myself. I'm irritable. I'm aggravated. Okay. Just the different things that are inconvenient to me or whatever. And I so beat myself up over this. It just makes me feel so bad when I lose my temper and get irritable and grouchy. Okay. And so I have been meditating. I've been doing all kinds of things, studying my scriptures, trying to, and pleading with God, make me more loving, fix me, fix me. And I was listening today to a video that my friend Donna Blevins did several years back. And Donna is 6'5". And everybody asked her, did you play basketball? And she says, yeah, I played basketball in high school, but she's kind of embarrassed about it, because she was like, I wasn't very good. I didn't want to play basketball. The coach came up to me and said, hey, you're 6'5", let's put you on the team. And she really didn't want to do it. And she would just kind of stand there. They'd throw her the ball. She'd shoot, miss a bunch. And in her mind, she'd occasionally make the basket. And so she kept asking herself, why am I such a poor basketball player? Why am I so bad at this? And that's the story she told herself. And until, she graduates, she goes on. And some years later, she's on one of these talk shows. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is on the same show with her. She's being interviewed by Gary Collins. And in the green room, before she goes out, she and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar are hanging out and talking. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar asks her, you're tall, did you play basketball? And she's like, yes, sir, I played basketball. This is the first time she's proud of it. But then she tells him the story about how she just wasn't very good and she was such a poor basketballer. And he asked her, well, what was your average? Do you know? And she told him. And he throws his head back and he starts to laugh. And she thinks he's kind of laughing at her, making fun of her, and she's starting to shrink. And he goes, you know Magic Johnson? And she's like, oh, yeah. He goes, well, Magic Johnson's average was, I think it's like 23 points a game. Well, Donna's average was 36 points a game. She goes, oh, well, maybe I was good. And he goes, no, not good. You were a star. You were amazing. But all this time, she had been counting her losses instead of her wins. She had been looking at all the times she missed the ball going into the basket versus the goals that she had made. And she's talked about how we need to pay attention to what we're counting. Count the good in your life. And it made me think of God in Genesis. God created the light and he saw that the light was good. He creates the fish. He saw that the fish were good. God is acknowledging the good. He's celebrating his wins. What I realized is I have been counting the wrong things in my interactions with my dad, because like 90-some% of the time I'm patient, I'm doing this, I'm not getting frustrated. And there's just those some times when I'm trying to get something else done and here we've got a mess and I'm just like, I don't want to clean the mess up. So I have been counting and telling myself I'm a horrible daughter or I'm impatient or I'm not good enough, when really all these other times I am a good daughter. So I should be telling myself I'm a good daughter, I'm a patient caregiver, I'm a good caregiver, Count the wins, look for the good, don't look for the times where you mess up. So that's another point that I'd like to share is maybe you're doing or being or receiving, but you're not counting that. You're counting where you don't receive or when you don't do what you want to do. Count the good. Shift, because the world has both out there. And if you want to receive more, you have to see what it is that you want to receive. You have to believe it's there. In quantum physics, we learn that observed experiments change their outcomes. If somebody expects an experiment to go a certain way, it goes that way. If they expect it to go another way, it goes that way. There's something in the universe where observation changes outcome. So as we have our lives and we fix our focus or observation on what we don't want, we create more of that through our expectation, and it keeps feeding it over and over. But if we look for the good and we expect the good, then we'd receive that. So if we go back to the Limhi story, what if they expected to have to pay the full thing and to find their way out of their bondage? But God was up there I'm willing to give you the other option, like I gave Alma and his people. I've been happy to let you out, but you observed and you expected to have to do it yourself. Remember back in Mosiah 21:36, it says, and now all the study of Ammon and his people and King Limhi and his people was to deliver themselves out of the hands of the Lamanites and from bondage. All of their study, they devoted everything to figuring out how to get out of this mess. They weren't looking for God to deliver them, because all of their focus was on how are we going to get ourselves out of this mess. If they had thought God can deliver us from this if we put our trust in him, and they put all their focus over there, then they might have gotten that result, just like Alma and his people did. It's what we focus on that we receive. So if you want a different outcome in your life, look for the good, watch where you're focusing, count the good things, ask yourself the positive questions. Why am I such a great patient caregiver? Why am I such a good daughter? Why am I so faithful to God? Why is it so easy for me to pay my bills every month? Whatever it is that you are worried about or concerned about, shift into this positive thing and look for the good and celebrate your wins. Count your wins, not your losses. And then as you observe and focus and expect good from God. Do your best, be obedient, be faithful, and trust God to deliver you from whatever it is. And he will. Y'all take care, and God bless.